Really tragic news that we found out just a couple hours before we started taping. Norm Macdonald, the fantastic comedian, passed away at the age of 61. We were very sad to hear it. I do not think that Norm would want to hear anything sentimental, but I would like to say a few of my favorite things that I heard Norm say, that I was lucky enough to hear Norm say over the years. I started at SNL in 2001. And I remember one time Norm walked back into the studio to visit. I don't remember how old his son was at the time, but his son was young, and someone said, "Hey, Norm, how's being a dad?" And he said, "It's going great, still no abductions." That's the first thing I ever heard him say in person. I always think about this. I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I got it right. This is my favorite Weekend Update joke of all time that I think about often. It is a perfect Norm joke. The richest girl in the world, billionaire Athena Onassis, celebrated her 10th birthday this week. What's it like to be the richest girl in the world? Well, to give you some idea, at the party, they had 2 cakes. SNL 40th was a few years ago. I got to stand on stage with Colin Quinn and Kevin Nealon and Norm. And the SNL 40th was a night where everyone just got a couple things to say. There were so many people there, and it was really limited. And I remember the 4 of us each had a little thing to say. I believe memory serves before we introduced Chevy. I think that was the role we were serving. And I remember we all said our line, myself and Colin and Kevin, and then Norm just started talking. And none of it was what he was supposed to say. And Wally, you were holding the cards. And I will say, I haven't seen this much in my years with Wally, but you did a thing where you actually looked at the cards in an effort to find. And I remember laughing really hard, not at what Norm was saying as much as the idea that any of us thought Norm would play by anyone else's rules. On any night. He told me once that his favorite thing about SNL is you can still, it's like the last place on TV where you can bomb. And, you know, there's a warm-up comedian at the beginning of the night at SNL, usually a cast member or a writer, but the commercials, it's not like going to a sitcom taping or other tapings where anyone is trying to keep the energy up during the course of the show. And Norm said that was so great because by the time Update rolled around, if the show was bad, you could literally just go out there and bomb. And that both made that level of difficulty something that I think he really respected, and also he loved, or I should say, he just didn't care if he was bombing. If he thought the jokes were good, he had exactly as much fun telling them to a dead audience than to one who appreciated them. And I think for so many of us, we came up watching Norm and we thought that you were on the inside with him when you were watching him tell these jokes that you thought were great and no one in the room thought was good. And you just felt this connection to him and that ability to just stare into an audience unblinkingly telling the jokes that you believed in. He also told me that his son, I said to him, one of the hardest parts about doing Update for me was not telling every joke the way I thought Norm would tell it. Like I had to beat Norm's delivery out of me. It still sneaks in all the time, but I really had to keep an eye on it. And I told him how hard that part was to me. And he said, "I'm so glad to hear you say that because my son was watching you on Update and said to me, 'You talk like Seth Meyers.'" And he told me that when he said that, he said, "Oh no, my son doesn't know how time works." He was the gold standard, and he will continue to be the gold standard. And I would just suggest that everybody go watch him tell the moth story on Conan. Go watch any number of Norm Macdonald things tonight because they are really, truly timeless. Rest in peace, Norm. I will be right back with more Late Night.